Hey, Larry, it's Adam. Sorry to call you so late, but this is the only chance I'll probably have to call you. I got the check. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I'm just going to be straightforward, honest with you here and tell you I went on a totally destructive binge. I blew every penny. I didn't pay my rent. I'm getting evicted from my place tomorrow. No car, shit job, you know, no company, lonely, depressed. And to be really honest, I'm just planning on getting a barbecue grill and lighting it in the room and tune myself in with carbon monoxide.
So please, folks, I got a warm welcome for Adam Leslie, everybody. Adam Leslie, give it up for Adam!
Let me sing a funny song with crazy words that roll along. And if my song can start you laughing, I'm happy, so happy. Let me sing of Dixie's charms, of cotton fields and Mammy's arms. And if my song can make you homesick, I'm happy.
I totally believed that showbiz myth. In fact, when I was a kid, I really wanted to live out of a suitcase in a hotel because I believed that's what the show business life was. William Demarest in the Jolson story.
Mammy, Mammy.
So I want to talk to you about the myth, the show business myth versus the show business reality, because in fact you do live in a hotel room out of a suitcase.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that show business myth that drew you in, that seduced you, with the reality that you live in now?
Desperado, why don't you come to your senses?
One year on Halloween, my father made me up as the devil, and I went out trick-or-treating, and I remember being by myself, and I remember just like being despondent and walking down the street, and bam, I get hit by a car and dragged down the street like by my ankle. Volkswagen, and I'm laying in the street with this bloody ankle scraped to the bone, and a rabbi just came by and sort of broke through the circle and picked me up and just carried me home. And I always thought what a weird image that must have been for people on the street to see a rabbi carrying a devil down the street in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Come down from your fences, open the gates.
I was asleep. I don't remember where we lived. It was Brooklyn or Queens. I remember being woken up from a dead sleep, and my mother and father both sort of peering over the bed, and my father just blurting out, "Your mother and me are splitting up. Who do you want to live with?" And me going, I don't know. And he's going, "You got to tell us who you want to live with." And they were totally confronting him. Look, I don't know. To this day, I remember just breaking down and crying because I couldn't possibly make that choice. I just didn't know what to say. I just didn't know. And I finally remember after being grilled for what in retrospect seems like hours, and them saying, "You have to answer right now, you have to tell us now." I remember distinctly finally going, "Okay, then I'll live with Mom." And I remember my father saying, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because women cry more." And that's what I made that decision on.
Your pain and your hunger are driving you home.
My grandmother, who we called Nana, was really, really loving, kind, sweet woman, but, major depressed before depression was diagnosed, and crazy in her own right. She also had this idea that the Irish people, because I had a couple of Irish friends, that they all couldn't wait to stab a Jew in the back. She goes, "Nobody likes the Jews, but the Irish are the worst. You'll see, you'll have a fight with them. The first chance they get, they'll say, 'Jew bastard.'" But like if Frankie Fontaine would come on Crazy Guggenheim from the Jackie Gleason show, she would come out of the kitchen with whatever she was preparing and go, "Oh, does he hate the Jews? Boy, the Jew-hating bastard. does he hate the Jews? She would do that with him, Jackie Gleason. Then, of course, when Ed Sullivan would come on, she'd go, he's okay, he's married to a Jewish girl.
Don't you think it cold in the winter time? The sky won't snow and the sun won't shine.
My father was writing for Alan King. He was the MC at the Carmel Hotel. There were occasions where he was really belly laugh funny.
When I was a kid, I had chronic bronchitis, and I didn't know how to swallow my saliva, and I didn't know how to breathe. So I talked like this, and everything was a sentence, and I didn't stop talking till I ran out of the air.
And my father would say, you know, with a voice like that, you could never be a comedian. I would constantly beg my father. He'd say, please, just imagine if you could get me on the Johnny Carson show as the youngest comedian ever. You know, I can do it. And my father would say, I can't introduce you to any agents because of the way you eat. And every day we'd leave in the morning, and we'd say, where you going, Dad? He goes, I'm going to make the rounds. You know, what did that mean? But all we knew is every night, at like 5 o'clock, he would come home dead drunk. But he'd come into the bedroom sometime and he'd have a suitcase. And he'd put the suitcase on the bed and he'd open the suitcase and it would be nothing but beer. Ballantine beer or Schaefer. And he's like, you know, I'm going to quit drinking. So I need this beer to quit drinking. Because he was drinking, like, you know, a whole bottle of scotch, like in 5 minutes. Like, like 5 o'clock, he would come home dead drunk, pissing in his pants, vomiting. Get his eyes, you know, just go, Buddy Hackett loved me because I could drink laying down. And then, like, I would try to go to sleep, and he would come in the room, and he just wouldn't let me sleep. He'd go, you're my friend. Wouldn't let me sleep at night, you know.
How old are you?
Like 8 or 9, probably 8. Also, you know, my father would traumatize me by saying, you know, if you ever tell anybody I'm gonna die, you know, and I can die anytime I want. And he'd say, look, I'm gonna die right now.
He would say that to you?
And he would feign death. And then he would just lay there and, you know, then I'd try to wake him, Dad, Dad, Dad. He wouldn't move. He would feign this death really for extended periods of time. You know, I remember one time he'd say to me, if you don't get me a drink, I'm gonna die. And I was like, I don't know where to get a drink. You know, where am I gonna get you a drink? Where? And he'd go, get me one or I'm gonna die. And then he would just lay there. And at that point, I really wanted to kill my father. There was an act at the hotel to do a show. My father was the MC, and he's nowhere to be found. Nobody can find my father. Finally, they go backstage. He's like laying on the floor with the bottle of Cutty Sark, like in a pool of piss and vomit. Way too drunk to go on. So I was backstage going, I'll do it. I'll bring the act on. And I MC'd the show. And it was just a natural. You know, I was definitely addicted to the stage already at that point. My stepmother, she was a singer and she was working up at the Carmel Hotel. At the time she met my father, they were actually a threesome with my father, her, and a transvestite, a hairdresser. I'm not familiar with my father's sexual preferences. Something tells me he was not vanilla. You know, and he started talking about, you know, how his wife's daughter was making sexual advances to him. You know, all this deluded shit, you know. And then he had this phrase that he goes, you know, Sherry Ann, you know, she's coming on to me. She's coming on to me all the time. The little bitch coming on to me. Did I do anything bad? My stepmother, Sherry's kids moved in. I liked it because her daughter and I would make out and play feel-up almost every night. But during this time, we'd smoke pot, and we also started sniffing a lot of glue, and eventually start taking acid. And that brings us to the story I told you last night, which were the worst years of my life. I've been on stage all my life already by the time I was 15. My popularity in high school was such that I had to put forth very little effort to bed those women. And I also was mature before my time. I had facial hair and a hairy chest. So I used to wear this sleeveless jumpsuit every day, like unbuckled all the way down to show off the chest hair. And I really had it made all through high school. I was in all the productions, I was in all the talent shows, I was a working comedian, I was funny. Just like looking through the newspaper and I saw this ad for the Fame Agency. And he calls me one day, he goes, "You want to work?" I go, "Yeah, I want to work." He goes, "Okay." His name is Sebastian the Great, but maybe you could open for him. He would catch a bullet in his teeth, that was his closing, but he would be introducing it, and it was so obvious that there was some mechanism already in there. He'd go, "For my final routine tonight, I will catch an actual bullet fired from a rifle in my teeth." And then he would drive, then he would leave the gig, blindfold himself, get in his car, and drive backwards. Okay, well, it's a 3-month gig. It's only $1,000 a week, but they put you up, and it's in a little tiny town called Canyonville, Oregon. It's me, this middle-aged singing impressionist team, husband and wife, really bad. They do Stephen Eady, she does Cher, he does Neil Diamond. They're just god-awful, just horrible impressions. They look nothing like them, they sound nothing like them. It's all about costume changes. And the other act on the bill is a transvestite from Houston that closes the show with a big Tina Turner in drag. And this is the show, and it's called American Superstars. I get the job in Reno. It's like 2 shows a night. A family show at 7 and the topless show at 10. And it's a midget parody. It kills every night. Well, I was actually the very first act to step on the stage at the comic strip. I was going to host. And I brought on Paul Reiser, Jerry Seinfeld, just a powerhouse, standing ovation, knockout show. It just killed. I worked a lot with Eddie Murphy, back on Long Island when he was first starting out. He moved up really, really fast. But he's a guy that I worked with on quite a few occasions after he had a couple of seasons on Saturday Night Live. I used to work in Denver, so on many occasions I would go there to headline the club, and 2 of the local acts would be Louis Anderson and Roseanne Barr. So I stayed at Louis Anderson's house for a week. Me and Roseanne did a one-nighter, I remember, in Boulder, and we had a great time. We were sitting in the back of the car, driving up there, we were sharing a bottle of wine. I introduced a few acts. Ellen DeGeneres, Dave Chappelle, Sarah Silverman. I got her a weekend at a seafood restaurant in Washington.
Talk about this at Kennesaw.
Sam came to New York and he was going to do this movie. He asked me to be one of the writers on the movie. And of course, Sam was laying out huge lines of coke. Like 2 minutes, Sam pulls an ounce out of each sock and starts cutting really big lines again. And we talked for like a minute about the movie, and then everybody falls into like a dead silence. With Sam, you really couldn't get to the work. It was, you had to get through the coke and the liquor first, and you never got to the work. When I go on the road, I had a reputation as being a party monster, and I was going to have coke, all-night discos, the after-hours bars, meet some strippers, go in the bathroom and do a bump, go to dinner, after dinner do a bump, after the show come back to my room, we'll do a line. So the guys like to hang out with me, and all the waitresses from the club like to hang out with me, and so I do some strippers, and I had slept with some strippers. I realized that I was actually shy with women. I found that if I had some cocaine, it became very easy to say, "You want to come back to my room and do some lines?" It also became very easy for them to say yes. I think all the women look a little bit like my mother. I call this girl Lexi. Her name was Victoria, Malika, Laura, Deanne. And shortly after Ellen, I met Deanne. In fact, they crossed over. I broke up with Ellen over the phone while Deanne was in my room. Black girl, really, really, really pretty. When I met her, she was a mime. This beautiful Angela Bassett looking hooker. And we were just having sex, and she'd start saying things like, "I like to have my temperature taken." They all thought she looked like Skeletor. Overweight to the point where it was almost untouchable. Had she been thinner and hotter, it would have been more forgiving. And Allison, her name is Allison, her friend is named Allison. It's like the movie Heathers. They're all named Allison. So she has this huge episode about how, you know, I'm not there for her and I'm gonna die a horrible, lonely death, which, by the way, she was right. I believe I met this hooker on the street that I always have a hot for. Her name was Wiggles, and she's a really, really sexy girl. And I invited her to my room. 2 or 3 minutes later, there was a knock at the door, and I opened the door, and it was like a guy that she'd invited, like some big, menacing black dude, you know? And he walked in and immediately said, "Where's your money?" I was like, I don't have but $40. Got up behind me and just got me in a chokehold and choked me so hard, literally lifted me off the ground where my feet were wiggling. I couldn't breathe, and I thought for sure I was definitely going to die, without a doubt. Finally, he let me down. He took my wallet, my watch, my cell phone. He left, and he left the girl there. And in my mind, you know, I was real high. I was still thinking, well, maybe there's a shot I could fuck the girl. And the next day, I walk out of the place, and the guy is walking by wearing a shirt that he stole from me, by the way. And he just said, "I'm sorry, man." And he handed me my wallet back with the ID in it.
When was the last time you actually had any kind of extended relationship?
Well, you would have to define extended relationship.
More than one date.
Well, does living with a woman for a week count? I wouldn't say that there was much of a relationship. I mean, she was a hooker and she had Johns coming in and out of the room. I wake up 5 o'clock in the morning, there's some like 19-year-old frightened Chinese kid sitting next to my bed, you know, and she's got like, you know, the pipe. I go on, hit it. Almost every guy in here, I'm sure, has been part of this conversation at one point in his life. Like you'd be out on the street with a buddy, with a friend, and a woman will walk by. Maybe she's not that good looking. Your friend will give you a nudge and go, "What about her? Would you fuck her?" What kind of question is that? I'd fuck Shrek. I'm loving it. I have my own dressing room with my name on the door. I mean, when I lived here and I had that house on the cul-de-sac and the Jaguar, life was great. First thing I wanted was a bed. You know, I'd never really had like my own comfortable bed to sleep in. I bought a nice TV, I got cable hooked up, I had my laptop, I bought a little desk, I had nightstands, I got a phone, I got a credit card. You know, I stole all the material. I would just do Andy Kaufman, Jay Leno, and Robert Klein. You know, a little bit of my father, a little bit of Lenny Bruce, and 10 minutes of original material. Somebody approached me, they were coming up to headline a club in Montreal called Stitches, and I really only had about 15 or 20 minutes of original material. So I was working at the comic strip in New York, and I always had a great memory, so I remembered Mark Schiff's whole act. And I went up to Montreal, and I did my 10 minutes, and then I immediately shifted into Mark Schiff's act. And I did like his whole act, like beginning to end, probably better than he does it. The final night of the gig, I finished the last show, the MC comes out. "Thank you all so much for coming out to Stitches. It was a great week. Don't forget to come back next week when our headliner is Mark Schiff." To be perfectly honest, I've stolen material my whole life. You know, I've always been a guy to take the easy route. I never write. My father had a stroke, and he just became like a gelatinous mess on a scooter. I promised to go over there and take him to dinner and a fight one night. So I go over and he's in the bed, and you know, I got to transfer him to the cart, you know, the scooter. So like I got a nurse that was like 1, 2, 3, and he's really gotten heavy at this point. It's like probably 230, 240, and we load him into the little motor scooter, and he scooters out to the rental car, and I lift him off the scooter, shove him in the car, and I take the scooter and I break it down and I put it in the trunk, and we're off to the restaurant. So we get to the restaurant, and I realize, oh shit, I gotta get the scooter. So I get the scooter out of the trunk and I reassemble it, and I lift my phone and get him back on the scooter, and we go into the restaurant. And he's like, I don't want to sit in this chair for the meal. You know, he's like, I want to sit in a regular chair. So, you know, of course, get him in a regular chair. we have the meal, and now it's time to go. We're gonna go watch the Mike Tyson fight on pay-per-view. So, you know, I gotta bring the cart back, get him on the cart, out to the car, shove him in the car, break down the scooter. We get to the fight place, take out the scooter, put it back together, take my phone, into the scooter, into the fight place. It was Mike Tyson against Spinks. And I bend down to tie my shoe, and I look up, and the fight's over. It was the shortest fight in heavyweight history, 17 seconds the fight lasted. So I remember like one night, like my father was in bed already, and I feel terrible about this today. So I have no patience with him, no compassion really. And I remember like he got me so mad that I started punching the pillow next to his face. You know, not touching him, but punching the pillow next to his face going, "I'm about to kill you, I'm gonna fucking kill you." Anyway, when he finally left, when we finally got him on the plane, I remember it was like a middle seat on the plane in the no smoking section. And him going, no, you can't do this to me. You can't, Adam, don't leave me here. Don't leave me in non-smoking. And I was like, he's gonna be fucking unhappy anywhere. Close the door. You know, I couldn't wait for him to be gone.
Desperado, oh, you ain't getting no younger.
And I actually had a really good buzz with Robert Morton from the Letterman show. You know, he was going, I was thinking maybe you should write some stuff for Dave. I actually go home and for one of the few times in my life, I really get focused and I write some stuff and I write some really good stuff. And Bob Martin actually calls me and he goes, this stuff is great. He says everything except welcome aboard. So 2-3 weeks later, I called Bob Morton and I say, what's going on? He goes, I can't believe it, but the head writer passed on it. So anyway, I get a job working at the Stage Deli in LA, seating people, and the very first night, within the first hour I'm there, Bob Martin walks in and I'm seating him. You know, and I said, I'm a little embarrassed, Bob. Of course, I never heard from the Letterman people again. You know, they all started off the same. I'm dead broke, I don't have money for bus fare, I had no job, no money, I don't have cigarettes, I don't have food money, I don't have money for a newspaper. The lights were off, the rent wasn't paid. Without a cell phone, without a watch, without ID. So the guy had stolen my wallet. One guy, out of nowhere, just sucker punched me. He'd go to the closet and take like a wooden hanger and whack me with it. Don't you ever close that door on me. And he's getting right in my face with the curled lip and the arms swinging.
And I'd like swallowed like 3 teeth.
And I'd pick up a folding chair and hit him over the back. Don't you ever close that door on me. What I use for self-defense is a sympathy tactic. You know, like, please don't hit me, I'm a frail old guy.
And he turned around the elevator and just totally sucker punched me in the mouth.
I spit blood all over the walls. It was like a brawl at an old West bar. The next day, he goes, yeah, man, I hope you're not too offended, by last night. It ain't nothing personal, but it's just business. And don't forget the Joker. And somehow I met this guy, very Nordic-looking Swedish guy named Chaim, crazy crackhead. My roommate was Sandy Barron, and Sandy Barron really didn't have that much of a substance abuse problem. He was just plain fucking nuts. The first night I came in, he was taping a strip of tape from the wall, down the floor, all the way to the other side, saying, that's your half of the room, this is my half of the room. Also, he told me he had been held hostage at gunpoint. He claims that my father's partner, Larry, had him at gunpoint in the penthouse at the Fontainebleau Hotel for like 3 years. Jimmy Olsen's a guy that, hard to explain, he's like a man-child. He's a 60-year-old guy from Pittsburgh, and he talks just like this. And he's really irritating, and he's got to tell you everything. Look at this cheese I bought. Look at this Tillamook cheese. Look at this boat in a bottle I just bought. Huh? Look at that. Isn't that cool the way they get it in a bottle? So when I come home from work, Jimmy Olsen would be sitting on the couch in his underwear with his spindly legs, eating big blocks of cheese.
I would tend to steal something from the supermarket or go across the street to Ralph's. I had no money at all, no cash at all. And you know, one time I took like a whole hot chicken in the tray and actually stuffed it down my shirt, and it was so hot that my fucking chest was burning up. And I had to leave the store, and I just got home and I tore the shirt off, and my stomach was all, there was a big square burn where the tray was. It was completely burnt. And one day I went into my office in my apartment building for something, and there was nobody at the desk, and I noticed a board with all the keys on it. And I grabbed like 3 or 4 apartment keys. And like later that night, like at 2 in the morning, I snuck into those apartments and robbed them. I started breaking into apartments on a regular basis. I went into a guy's apartment and I'm tiptoeing around on his nightstand, this gigantic fucking pistol, and I took it. And I start looking through his drawers and I see a badge. So I'm like, you know, in the home of a cop stealing his gun at 2 in the morning. What I was really doing to make bigger dough was going into Moss Brothers department stores and stealing leather jackets, like off the rack, to the point where I would just wheel the rack right to the exit and then just take them and throw them over my arm. You know, then I remember like one day planning on doing it again and going in, and all the jackets were chained. I, to this day, think I'm the reason that jackets are chained to racks in department stores now. You know, I just go into the store, I go right to the luggage department, I get a duffel bag, I take that over to CDs and DVDs, I load it up, I walk out the door, and then one time it was just at Kmart and I did it again, and some guy came running out the store after me, was an off-duty cop that just happened to be there at the time. You know, like the security guard was looking at the disc and counting it up and adding it up, and she's like, man, you $5 over for felony. You know, and she picked up like some really bad tape, like Brianna or something, and said, you made a felony for this. I got a ride with my brother John to Neiman Marcus, and there was a jewelry case. There was a little gap in between the 2 doors, and on the very first row of this jewelry case were diamond pendants, starting with the number 1, going all the way up to the number 10. And coincidentally, right where the doors split in the jewelry case was the number 5. So I just took like a pen from the cashier's desk near the register, and I started walking the number 5 through the slit in the 2 doors. I'm walking out of the store, and I'm actually clear down the block. And the security guard comes out and calls me like I'm literally a half a block away, and he goes, hey, you. And I stop and I go, what? Like a fucking idiot. The stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. At this point, I take the diamond 5 out of my pocket and I swallow it. So they bring me into the office and they're like, give us back the diamond and we won't prosecute. I'm like, I can't give it back. They're like, you know, regurgitate in this bucket. They give me a bucket. I'm trying to force puke. They take me immediately to the hospital to x-ray me, to see if they can see anything in my stomach. And I hear all the doctors in the x-ray room laughing. Like they're all laughing, like a pretty good, solid, hearty laugh. And then the cops walk me into the x-ray room and they got my x-ray on the board, and there's a number 5 right there in my stomach, shining so bright and clear, like only a diamond could. You know, you have all this smoky, foggy imagery of the lung, but this number 5 is just so contrasted and clear. It's almost like a superhero thing. It's so visibly the number 5. And they caught me off to jail. Very, very shortly out of getting out of jail in the Bahamas.
Just getting out of prison, a lot of whores.
Put in a van and shackled, busted with drugs. So I got busted for that. So they take me to like the local jail. He said they're offering you probation. He said I wouldn't take it because you'll never make it through the probation. I said, if we postpone it, how long do you think you can postpone it? He said, till the last witness dies. Then one night at the comic strip, I picked up this hooker on the boulevard, and I said, come back to my room. I got some Coke, and we got back to my room, and I had like an 8-ball of Coke. And she's like, why don't we cook this up? So we cooked it up and smoked it. And then she says, let's get some more. I'll call my girlfriend.
and she calls her girlfriend. Her girlfriend comes over with like a couple of really big rocks. You know, the three of us are in bed, every which direction. Eventually I described the feeling as ascending to heaven with a choir of angels singing, because you get this rush where you actually like get deaf almost, as you just hear this like, I tried heroin and I OD'd. Stopped breathing, turned blue. I had just come out of the Betty Ford Center. Within an hour, we had some crack and a hooker. I walked over to that little briefcase and it was filled with bags of cocaine. Then one night on the strip, I just picked up this hooker and I brought her back here. Anytime that I'd go into a strange town to work a club on the road, so I would just call a cab, I'd get the cab up and I would just say, take me to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. You know, because I just knew that there would always be drugs there. And they would just take me there and guarantee you within a 5-minute walk in any direction, I could find virtually anything I needed. I was upstairs with the girl, and about an hour later, there's a knock at the door, and I'm like, who the heck could that be? And the girl goes, that's my friends. I called my friends, they got something for you. Because she didn't have any crack, and she knew I wanted it, so they came into the house, and sort of like they owned it, and just started looking around and casing everything. So the hooker knocks at my door, and behind her walks TC, and he's like, motherfucker, you stole my dog. You sold my motherfucking dog. I'm like, I didn't sell the dog, man. He was driving my dog crazy. I found him. You sold my fucking dog. Bam, hauled off and decked me, literally in the kitchen. Like I back up against the fridge and slide down, and I'm like, I'm broke, I'm penniless, I'm high as a kite. I have no more drugs now, and I don't have a single penny, and I have a house full of people, all of whom wish me knowledge. So I flew out of this house, and like I said, this is the first time I'm seeing it now in 4 years.
How do you feel?
Feels good. I feel, you know, a distance from it now, you know, like, you know, I see somebody else's truck in there, and I know there's a different life there, but, you know, it's a great memory. But one night I got really, really, really high, and I didn't feel like I could go on. You know, I just didn't feel like I could do the show. And I was in the dressing room of the ship, and I was working with a magician, and you know, they were like introducing me. I said, I can't do it. I just can't do this show. And he literally shoved me out onto the stage. So he was another drug addict, and you know, he was like, just go do this. And he pushed me out, and I had an unbelievably great show. And in fact, the cruise director said to the assistant cruise director after the show, he said, you see, when Adam Leslie is sober, he can be brilliant. And I was so high I couldn't walk or talk. So I was late. I missed the first show one night. Sweating, white mouth, show up at the gig, my spot is over. And then the next night, I hadn't slept for so long. I'm in my dressing room, and I'm laying on the couch with my shoes off. And the dance captain is shaking me, going, you're on, they introduced you. So I just bolt up the stairs to the stage, and I'm not wearing any shoes. And the next morning, I got a call from Greg Thompson, and he said, don't show up tonight, you're done. He goes, Adam, dude, you work for 1 hour a night. He said, guys like you, you're gonna end up either dead or in jail, and that's it for you. You know, there's no two ways about it. You know, I don't know what to tell you, you're a powder keg. And he said, you know, you're a hustler, and I could use a hustler to give out these 2-for-1 tickets. I'll give you $10 for everyone that shows up. And Greg called me and he said, you know, I'm just not getting enough production from you. You know, so I went to the maitre d' and I said, I don't have anywhere to go, man. I'm homeless. You know, I'm finally penniless and homeless, absolutely nowhere to go. Do you think I could maybe crash here in the office? He was like, it's okay with me, but I have to check with the higher ups. So they check with the higher ups. He says, no, they said you can come in and take a shower. And here, take this jacket. And he gives me an Armani jacket. And I say, you got any money I could borrow? He says, I only got $35. I go, that'll help. Totally wanted to kill myself. The only thing I had was my blood pressure medication, which was capsules. So I emptied all those capsules into a spoon, cooked it up, and I injected myself with massive overdose of blood pressure medicine, which did not kill me, but only bloated my stomach up for 3 days and caused me incredible gas and flatulence like you wouldn't believe for 3 full days. So this guy at work tells me the story about how there's these mass suicides now in Japan where they just rent a hotel room and they bring a little barbecue grill in. They light the barbecue grill, they all go to sleep and they don't wake up, which to me sounds great. You know, I mean, I'm definitely a coward. I'm not putting a gun in my mouth. I'm not jumping off a bridge. I'm not throwing myself in front of a bus or a train. I know myself, I can't do it. I have enough trouble trying to stick a needle in my arm. But I could actually imagine myself bringing the grill in and going to sleep. The most troubling thought of all of this was that in order to make it effective, I would have to put duct tape over the air conditioning vents and around and seal off the windows. My concern was it would be so incredibly hot in the room that I would die in tremendous discomfort. And that was a deterrent for me. I want to die in air conditioning, you know, with cable, you know. Ultimately, you know, started counting down to this Tropicana gig I have now and just said if I could just hang out for, you know, 2 more weeks. And that's been my plan. And that brings us to today. If you're in a situation where you have to live in this room, if you come back to this room by yourself at night and lay in the bed and maybe watch some bad fuzzy TV, that's a very different scenario than coming back to this room with a really sexy woman, a bottle of liquor, and a pocket full of rock cocaine, where you know you're gonna have sex, and you know there's gonna be some excitement, and there's gonna be intense conversation. Eventually, with drugs or alcohol, you're gonna burn everybody and end up just on your own, and there are no more relationships. Now that, you know, I'm over 50 and I look back, I blew the cruise ships, I blew the comedy clubs, I blew the Las Vegas gigs. One day I have this moment of clarity and I say, you know what, I'm gonna fuck this up if I keep doing drugs. And so I said, this will go on as long as I don't smoke crack. That's all I have to do is just not smoke crack. I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's time to kill myself.
Anyway, thank you again. I'm really, really sorry. I'm sorry for everything all the disappointments in the past as well. And I wish there was some way I could call you and talk to you, but that's that.
End of message.